Continuing Chapter 6, Parsi Piety, from Book 2, The Parsis, in The Treasure of the Magi, a Modern Study of Zoroastrianism. Well, I jumbled the subtitle, but James Hope Moulton is the author. It is not our task to discuss Gautama except as a foil to the older prophet, the study of whose message is the subject of this work. We have begun to ask wherein Zarathustra failed. No, it's the people who failed. The prophets never fail. They deliver the message they were told to deliver, or God wouldn't have called them. To ask the question is distasteful but necessary. Well, no, it's not necessary. Well, how did Jesus fail if Christians don't follow the teachings of Jesus? Oh, no, Jesus didn't fail. So you see the hypocrisy that he's doing here. And after all, study of his limitations is a real means towards appreciation of what he achieved. Well, yeah, see, I remember when some worker set his tools on top of my book. You know, what's wrong with people? Of course, people don't realize that some books are rare to come by. Oh, it's just, $3 worth of paper, right? Anyways, I'm sorry. But it shows the implication of the physical limits, of the intellectual limits, strengthens the belief in the inspiration and the revelation as what's coming through. Remembering the distinct time at which he appeared, we are more and more impressed with the grandeur and the purity of his revelation. Every time and place has its problems. But we have observed the vital fact that he inspired no successor. No Elijah caught the great prophet's mantle. As he soared on the wings of fire to the house of song, no gentle man of God remained to supplement the Elijah message of the one deity, holy and righteous, with the gracious teaching that might win the hearts as well as the minds of men. Vishtaspa, Frasha Ashtra, Jamaspa, and the rest were no doubt sincere and eager followers, but they did not supply the needed supplement to the message, or perhaps they didn't preserve it well enough. The long roll of saints in the Farvardan Yasht, whose names are all we know of them, the unknown good who rest in God's still memory, folded deep, may well have included many a noble soul, but the possibility that there were mute, inglorious Zarathustras and Pasa among them does not alter the fact that the religion bearing Zarathustra's name, well, actually Mazda Gasnehe is the religion, the era is Zarathustra. Has never reached a fresh inspiration carrying it beyond the point at which the founder left it. For that task there was needed a Zarathustrotara, if we may coin a comparative to describe something more than Zarathustra. Zarathustrotara? Okay. In the sense in which the least in the kingdom of heaven was greater than John the Baptist. The Parsis have had officially a Zarathustrotema, by which the superlative they describe a supreme pontiff. But they have no inclination to apply the term to any teacher of their own time. Adastur is ex officio Zarathustrotema, said a good Parsi to me, but it depends on the man. In other words, a dastur is a supreme authority when one agrees with him, like a bishop, with some Episcopalians. The superlative is held by Bartholomew to denote a Yazad presiding over the priestly order. It's Pravashi, we might say. In November 1915, the writer had the privilege of seeing Benares under the guidance of a missionary, the Reverend C.P. Cape, who has left his mark on the holy city in a wonderful work for the upliftment of the outcasts. We visited a large square hall, the temple of a small sect calling itself Radha Swami. We crossed the marble floor in stockinged feet and stood by the life-size photograph of a guru, which was built into a small monument on the level pavement over his ashes. There we talked till darkness fell with two priests of this weird doctrine. They proved to be Parsis. We asked them why they had adopted this new faith, and we were told that Zarathustra died long ages ago, and men craved a living voice, and alas, this was said over the ashes of their guru, who died in 1907. The Radha Swami priest offered the most searching criticism of the faith in which he was born. Zarathustra died 3 millennia ago, and men needed a living voice. Christianity would be in a like unhappy plight if it depended on dead prophets like Paul and Peter, or even the Luthers and Wesleys of modern times. And as Surah 3340? No, it's Surah 344, I think, of Al-Quran talks about it not think about the life. It sort of ends this whole fanaticism thing. So you don't have to spiritually existing, but the physical life, we don't worry about the life of a particular messenger. If they die or get killed, that has, The sage of Iran was not, like Moses, the founder of a goodly fellowship that took up the torch of life and passed it on. Well, perhaps they were, but thousands of years go by, and what are we left with if the people don't keep it up? Perhaps we have instinctively expressed the reason in the very line we have quoted, for Zarathustra was assuredly led by God in the way, and he had a great and splendid vision of truth, but the life he had only a very partial knowledge, for life is in the love of God, and that love was not revealed to him. We might profitably turn to Israel for a parallel. The earliest of the writing prophets, Amos, had a wonderful grip of the great principles of God's inflexible righteousness, his judgment against sin, and his promises to those who should turn and seek him. It was reserved for Hosea to learn in the school of sorrow the infinite tenderness of God towards sinful humanity, and so to prepare the way for the incarnate love. Iran had its Amos, but its Hosea never came, for Israel's Hosea was one in a great succession. Zarathustra stands alone. The strength and truth of his message deteriorated as it came into the hands of successors who could not even read its archaic language, and truths which he had failed to apprehend were not added by prophets taking up his teaching and carrying it further. Well, like the Bible says about Jesus, plarose, he came to refurbish the law. It's not that he may have been sent with the message for the time and place, but it wasn't that previous ones failed or anything like that. It's the people failed. The professional, the ha-kahanim, the general people, stuff happened that was out of their hands. But honestly, even after Christianity, it was only the advent of Muhammad that kind of had a figure that influenced more, even after all those thousands of years. But until about the 300s, or until really after the onset of Christianity, you really didn't need any more spiritual guidance in that area. There was still enough for people to be guided. let us pursue a little longer the necessary task of analyzing the elements in which Zarathustra's message was religiously turned towards deficiency. We may preface the analysis by observing that we only do what we must do for every prophet who came before the gospel or apart from the gospel. And again, Jesus wasn't claiming to be a founder of a new religion or anything like that either. Zarathustra would have abhorred it. So many paths are redone, and to the point where people don't even think, oh, well, Zarathustra, Moses, Muhammad, they were all, none of them were wanted to be founders of religions. And they all consider themselves as part of the same path. It is a very great thing, indeed, that there is nothing but defect to urge against him. Even among the prophets of Israel, there were some who gave a message including elements that were temporary, and indeed, when we read them in the light of fuller revelation, a conspicuous insistence is the denial of a life beyond the grave, wherein there is remembrance of God. Now, that sort of thing, there's huge gaps. And you can tell, the Bible mentions 74 texts that weren't included. Some texts were in the Bible, but cut out of later Bibles. And then there are hundreds of texts that could have been included in the Christian and Jewish Bibles. But some of the texts that are even mentioned are much bigger than the Christian and Jewish Bible put together. So, who knows what was there to start with? How are we to say? In the teaching of Zarathustra, we have found no doctrine of religion that needs to be cut away. The greatest of gentle later prophets, unless we set Socrates by Gautama's side as his peer, taught the doctrine of reincarnation and ignored God, which colossal defect necessarily counts as a positive and not a mere negative blot on a system. Our examination of the Gathas has proved, so we venture to claim, that there's nothing to blot out in Zarathustra's theory. Now, there are different types of prophets. There are sectarian prophets. There are prophets of Satan. I've rejected both of those, but I'm not saying they didn't have their experience. Obviously, there are really spiritually gifted people. There are people who fake it completely. Like, a lot of oracle readers had no real connection to anything spiritual and what they're doing. They're just cold reading and making up stuff. That's why an honest reader of an oracle would say, hey, I'm arranging a symbolic lesson, and I'm looking at your reactions to kind of personalize it for you. That's it. That's what being honest about these things would be. Having made that claim and adding to it a reminder of the extraordinary depth and truth of his positive doctrine of God, of conduct, and of the hereafter, we shall not be suspected of belittling the pioneer thinker of the Aryan world when we show what was left for other thinkers to unveil. And even if you compare the paths, Christianity could be said to be missing some things that Zoroastrianism has. The preliminary defects of Zarathustra's teaching we have already mentioned. There is nothing explicit to call for self-sacrifice. It would have been easy for a successor thoroughly imbued with Zarathustra's spirit to deduce from his master's life and words the supreme importance of this element, to make the religion a real missionary faith, inspired by the prophet's own eagerness to convert all mankind. It was clearly necessary that enthusiasts should enter the grave service, prepared to leave all and follow the gleam. Were Frasha Ustra, Jamaspa, Maid Yuma Unga, or Ishat Vastra, the prophet's son, men who could form a preaching order like Gautama's earliest followers? Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to tell a few centuries later. Just like with Christianity, it's really hard to tell. I think that more was probably preserved of Zarathustra's words, of the words that came through Zarathustra, than Jesus and, well, the Buddha. There were a bunch of Buddhas, actually, because Buddha Yoga produced a bunch of Buddhas, but the Gautama's earliest followers, like the Franciscans, like John Wesley's band, we do not know. But if they were, they did not stamp on their founder's teaching the logical inference which he failed to draw from his own spiritual ambition. Even Hinduism lives by the inspiration of its little band of saints who, for the love of God, have been ready to forsake earthly happiness. No such band meets our eye in the history of the Parsi community. We should not count it as a defect that the religion refused to bid men practice austerity for its own sake, or with the hopes of winning occult power, but it would certainly have made a great difference if the faith of Zarathustra had been preached to after generations by a succession of men who loved the truth more than wealth or home or fame, and would give up all these not to acquire merit, but only where the interests of their mission were better served thereby. Paul was no fakir, no pursuer of asceticism as a means of grace, but he did one thing, if anything else came in the way of it, he threw aside. Hence the passions so well expressed in his modern interpreter's words. Yes, without cheer of sister or of daughter. Yes, without stay of father or of son. Lone on the land and homeless on the water. Pass I in patience till the work be done. And the inspiration of that utter self-sacrifice has been an even greater power in Christianity than the living letters that teach us the doctrine Paul spent himself to proclaim. We shall not go far wrong if we link this deficiency with the deficient element in Zarathustra's doctrine of God. Yeah, well, certainly Christians that have to pretend monotheism would see some of these issues, would claim that issue. Awe, adoration, obedience, all these could be wakened by the revelations of the wise Lord. But love, did Zarathustra love Mazda? Well, he certainly spoke of it more than the New Testament does, but true, he pleads with him to reveal truth to him as a friend to a friend. But the Gathas do not develop this thought. Yeah, that's not quite true. Well, they don't develop the thought. It's supposed to be a revelation. That's the difference. Thank you very much. The doctrine of immortality sprang, we have seen, from the conviction that the unconquerable righteousness of God, the saints of Israel won it from their conviction of his love. Love's actually a clearer thing in the tonic than it is in the Hapabilia. Habiblas, yeah, It does not need much knowledge of human nature to see how incomparably mightier was this latter force. I heard a sound over. Even among men, it is written, one will hardly be found to die for the inflexibly just, though perhaps for the good man, one who exhibits the lovable qualities, some which will be found ready even to die. It is fanciful to conjecture that a warmer creed, one instinct with the love of God, or with that tender sympathy for mankind, which is the love of God in another form, might have attracted disciples whose fervent zeal would have made the religion of worldwide power, and not merely the creed of a handful. It was probably the heater, and over there is just wind moving the roof. Another form of attracted disciples whose fervent zeal would have made the worldwide power, and not merely the creed of a handful. Very closely connected with the failure to realize love of God is the weakness of the doctrine of grace and forgiveness. The question is one asked in the Gathas. Where there is recompense for wrong to be found, where pardon for the same, where shall they attain right? Where is holy piety? Where best thought? Thy dominions, where are they, O Mazda? That is, all these are to be found in the dominions of Mazda. The kingdom of heaven is the place of repentance and pardon, and perfect justice, of devotion and heavenly mindedness. But how is pardon attained? There is silence on that question. But we know that merits and demerits were weighed inexorably, and the balance, however small, turned the scale for heaven or hell. This principle is so fundamental that it seems impossible to escape the inevitable conclusion. What hope is there for a sinner who repents? Only it would seem that he might have time enough allotted to him wherein to balance his transgressions with an accumulation of merit. In that case, everything will depend on the duration of his respite and the opportunity he gets for gathering merit of adequate weight. On the other side, we may have a man who declines from virtue, in whose case salvation depends on his dying before he has exhausted his credit balance. Zarathustra was so intensely keen upon securing a treasury full of merit, whereby the good spirit might win a final victory over evil, that he overlooked the consequences of the mechanical system he endorsed, that he inherited it, and did not invent it, makes the oversight of so penetrating and practical a thinker less difficult to understand. But in fact, what he overlooked was nothing less than the patient truth that to make the fruit good, we must make the tree good. Otherwise, we are only hanging branches of grapes on a bramble bush and calling it a vine.